Olivo, retired, former resident.
Barb States, community.
She's a community member. We have three community members. One is not here today. Barb's from Ben Salem,
Tom
and Tom's actually from Middletown. All right.
Dennis Penko from Middletown Township. I'm Finance Director.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, look, I want to thank you guys all for coming in today. We really appreciate you taking the time and helping us have a better perspective on this thing. Richie Webb was invited by me. I was looking to get somebody who might bring another perspective to the table on this issue. Now, I know there is a little bit of an organized opposition to this proposal, this earned income tax proposal, and I think Rich is somewhat a part of that effort, and since he has many years of experience on the school board, I thought he might be a good person to bring in to help shed some light on this, ask some questions. I don't know that we have questioned the need for the revenue. I think what perplexes us, and I think folks who have called or written, is that the need, and this is a significant revenue proposal. I mean, it's not a marginal increase in the property tax. It's a proposal that I think for average worker, you're talking several $100s a year. For a two-income couple, probably over $1,000 a year. So that's a lot of impact. And I think people might be wondering, I think we wonder as well, how you didn't see this coming, and had this been given a little prior notice, it probably could have been and maybe should have been part of the recent election campaign. It could have been an issue that would have been explored by incumbents running for re-election and folks running against them. That might have been a good way to really air it out for the community a little bit. So that's, I think, at least for me, that's the part I'm really having trouble with, is understanding how you really didn't see this coming. And it was explained to us that the pension issue is what really got you here. And I think we mentioned in our editorial, or one of them, that that's been a percolating issue in this state for a few years now. So who wants to start?
Well,
Go ahead.
I can give you my perspective, and then certainly Stephanie can provide whatever details that you want. And it's apparently a word I used has been bandied about in your editorial against me. The fact of the matter is, we saw this coming. And we talked about it at public budget workshops. You have to forgive me, I'm starting to lose my voice. I came in on the red eye last night just to make this meeting, which shows how important this issue and the community is to me. So we saw this back in 2010, my first time on the board, and we sat down and we looked at the fundamental imbalance between our revenues and our expenses. And whether it's government or whether it's business, and I come from the business world, I'm not a career politician. I did this to serve my community. I stepped up, put myself out there, subject myself to whatever criticisms there might be, because I'm trying to better my community. And we saw it back then. And at that point, we made a decision as a board that we didn't want to increase property taxes because we were in one of the worst economic recessions in history. And we gave our township manager the task to go and look to see how could we offset this imbalance, this structural imbalance that we've talked about that's existed within Middletown since 2006. And under that charter, the administration went and began to reduce costs, and Stephanie can speak to the specifics around that. But if you go back and you look at those notes, you know, real estate taxes were discussed at those public budget workshops. Earned income tax was discussed. And if you remember, we even announced a financial state of emergency, which allowed us for the first time to borrow against the investment fund.
Now, when was that state of
This was
emergency declared?
2010, 3 years ago. Actually, 4 years ago. Because it was for the 2010 budget, I believe.
No, it was in
Two-
2010.
2010. Okay, I'm sorry. It was
Yeah,
2010.
2010.
Again,
I
2
remember
hours sleep on an
specifically.
airplane. I'll do that
Got yelled
too.
at a lot.
So the board recognized it back then. Fortunately, we were able to look at other funds and other fund balances, take that money, take the money that came off the investment fund, the interest off the investment fund, use that as revenue to balance the budget. And we did that. And at the same time, we began to look at how we could significantly, reduce our costs. You know, one of our biggest costs within our general fund is our police department. You know, our labor issues are a little bit different than Rich's labor issues. You know, Rich did a phenomenal job of bringing the school board contract to closure, but, you know, we're not afforded that same type of leverage with the police department. We can't go out on strike. They go to what's called an Act 111 arbitration. So we know we need our police. We operated without a full complement of the police for a number of years to try to hold our costs down, but we know we need the police department. We know we need a fully staffed police department. I mean, just drive through Middletown. You know, look at the businesses we have there. Look at the transient population that we have come into Middletown. You know, take a drive of the Oxford Valley Mall over the holidays. Take a trip up to Sesame Place during the summer. I mean, Sesame Place is one of the largest amusement parks in the East Coast and probably one of the largest in Pennsylvania. So we need our police, but we felt that, you know, the cost of our police was getting to be exorbitant. And again, it's a function of a contract. We have a limited control over those costs to some extent. So we went to Act 111 arbitration. And for those of you that don't know how that works, the township presents their case, the police department presents their case, it goes to a neutral arbitrator, and the neutral arbitrator makes the decision, and you have to live with that decision.
So you have no choice. That's state law.
That's state law. That's state law. So,
And is there any appeal process?
For them, not for us.
for them, not for us.
So, and the arbitration process, you had no choice about going through that process? Could you have continued to negotiate? I mean, is there some sort of deadline?
There is a deadline. We were at an impasse, and that sends us straight to arbitration.
And who decides it's an impasse? I mean, just by virtue of not having a contract at X number of days,
Correct.
and then it goes to an arbitrator, and that's it. You lose all control at that point.
Correct.
Correct.
And we tried all the things. God, we tried. Healthcare was on the table. We wanted to co-pay for healthcare. Some of the things that we felt were driving the cost of operations were on the table. One of the things that we did get was we got elimination of a clause called DETRA, which probably generated over $1 million in overtime expenses. We had that stricken from the contract. Unfortunately, right now, the PBA is arbitrating that arbitration award. So they're still fighting us.
Can I just jump in real
Sure.
quick? I think it's really important, the question about did we know, when did we talk about it? So as Pat mentioned, in 2010, during publicly advertised budget workshops discussed, 2010, a state of emergency declared by the Board of Supervisors for the first time since the investment fund was established. In 2011, in September, during our MMO report, a public report by the Township Manager and Finance Director about what our pension funding requirements are. In 2011, during 2 publicly advertised budget workshop meetings. In 2012, again, during the MMO presentation, all these are public meetings. During the budget workshops and again during the budget presentation last year, we talked about the pension issue. And so again this year in our MMO presentation in September, and then again during 2 budget workshops. So I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different times we discussed the state of financial concern in the township over 3 years.
And at what point did you start talking seriously about the need for a earned income tax?
Well, it was discussed in 2010 as an option on the table for solving the problem.
Right. But
it was,
how far did that go? How serious was the discussion of that issue? Earned income tax, if you don't have one in a community, tends to be a bit of a red flag and really gets people's attention. So I'm curious that if that discussion was the focal point of a meeting and not a budget workshop, but I'm thinking a regular public meeting, that it might have garnered more attention than it received, because it doesn't seem like it got much attention from the public. I mean, true? That.
Well, through all of those budget workshops and all of those discussions, an earned income tax was part of the deliberation. But the board continued to come back each year to say, administration, can you get us through another year without raising property taxes on our residents? The answer was, yes, we could. Pat talked about how we tried to get health care contributions during the arbitration process. But what the administration did do over 3 years is get health care contributions from every other employee in the township. Everybody who isn't carrying a gun, from Ms. Tioli on down, contributes to their health care. Not too many.
At what rate? What's the percentage?
In a much more significant way than other municipalities. Our employees contribute 20% toward a deductible. We're in a high deductible plan. There's only one other municipality in the region that I know even has a high deductible plan. They contribute 20% toward the deductible, and the employees then contribute between 6 and 10% of insurance premium on a sliding scale based upon their income. So lower paid employees pay 6%, whereas I pay 10%.
And you're aware in the private sector people are
I understand the difference in the private.
35 to 35%.
Sure, I understand the difference.
But this was the first time.
And compared to our peers.
Let me just turn to both Richie and Tom for a second, who are both Middletown residents.
Mm-hmm.
And besides what you want to say at this point, can you answer this question? How aware were you of the possibility that an earned income tax would be under serious consideration at some point?
I read your paper every day, and I was first aware when, I guess, maybe three weeks ago when this first came in and when you first did the article.
Okay, so certainly not in 2010 or 2011.
I moved in, I've only been there 2 years in Middletown.
How about you, Rick?
35 years I've been here, and the first I heard of it was last month or 3 weeks or how long it's been. Ever since, actually, 2 weeks, ever since after the election. That's when I knew about it.
Guy, could I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Because there's little doubt I'm opposed to this income tax. It's going on the record. You've published it numerous times. But in absolute fairness, part of the problem here is the board communicates that they're having these workshops. The board communicates the problems that they're having. And until a red flag comes up like this, the people don't show up. We went through, but I can't tell you the last time we had a citizen show up at a budget workshop. I can't tell you the last time a reporter, no offense, showed up at a budget workshop. Okay? And all these things are constantly discussed. I mean, to Pat's credit, I mean, I fervently believe he's doing everything he thinks is right and he believes in to do this properly. And we've tried to turn around and be as transparent as possible. But they don't get involved until all of a sudden they see that it's going to cost them $1,000. And then the fun starts.
And if there were residents or the newspaper present at our budget workshops, it wouldn't have been a surprise because you would have covered it, right?
Could have done a press release, too. So you were considering it.
Press release to say that we talked about something that we're not going to adopt. At the end of the day, the final decision on the budget was We're not going to raise taxes. We're not going to raise property taxes. We're not going to impose an earned income tax. We're not going to move against the trust fund other than
In
the
the
$1 million
past years,
that has
that's
been
true.
authorized.
This year hasn't been decided yet.
But meanwhile, you're saying that you're bleeding down the escrows, forcing this kind of reality to be really considered years down the road, which you could have seen back then.
What do you mean bleeding down the escrow?
Well, in other
You're using
words,
surplus funds
Okay.
to cover your deficit. And it shrinks until the point where you have no choice.
And again, the board, we all, as we sit here today, have the hindsight of being able to look back and say, well, the economy didn't turn around as promised in 2010, 11, or 12. And had everybody known that the economy was going to remain stagnant, that there weren't going to be new housing starts, that there weren't going to be, the housing market was going to recover and we'd be getting real estate transfer taxes, that the trust fund would start again throwing off interest at the rate it had. Had we known in 2010 that we were still going to be mired in the exact same economic morass in 2013 and 2014, then perhaps, yes, things could have been done differently. But we were mired in that economic morass, and this Township Board of Supervisors gave direction to its administration. Let's not raise the burden of income taxes, property taxes of any kind, but particularly property taxes, because they're across the board. Irrespective of your ability to pay, you own a property, you own a residence, you're paying that tax. And if you're on a fixed income, if you're unemployed, you're underemployed, but you still own your home, you're paying that tax. Now, in the case of where we find ourselves today, the budget that's been presented is going to reduce the tax burden on that very same group of people that this Board of Supervisors has been trying to protect. The budget that's been presented reduces the property tax burden. Across the board, on anybody who's paying real property taxes, they will see a 2 mil property tax reduction.
And for the average homeowner, the owner of an average home in Middletown, that is how many dollars?
$58.
Okay.
And I think just back to the question before about the spending down of the reserve money, it was part of the public dialogue a year ago. It was part of the public dialogue during the budget presentation, which was televised, which was covered by your paper. We talked about the fact that this is what we've been doing. We're holding it together for another year, no tax increase. But I said it a year ago in a public meeting, it's not going to last forever. We're going to have to address the revenue problem.
And it may be purely semantics, but whether you call it reserve, a trust fund, an investment fund, I don't care what words you put to it. The township has $40 million. Just so everybody knows, the township has $40 million. That's the investment fund.
Let's stop for 1 second.
Okay.
While you're on that point, and just so everybody gets on the same page, so we all kind of understand, I thought Kristen did a pretty job in one of the stories, kind of explaining how you got to where you are. So if one of you could take maybe a minute and explain the reserve money you have, how it was fueling your budget or your spending over however many years it was, and what happened that caused that to stop, and it eventually spun into the problem you now have.
That is an important element in this discussion, an extremely important element in this discussion, because the investment fund is not used in Middletown like emergency funds are used in other townships. You know, fundamental issue with a township, whether, again, I was going to make this point earlier, in business or a township, your revenues have to either match or exceed your expenses. That hasn't happened in Middletown since 2006. And what was taking place was, and the investment fund was basically the money that Middletown Township got for selling off the Water and Sewer Authority.
Which was about $40 million?
Yes, yes. 43, I think, or...
40 million fund was established.
$40 million
That's
fund
the
was
fund.
established.
We can discuss.
So
whatever.
each year, because that imbalance was there, and you know, you just heard the gentleman in Bristol Borough say the same thing when they raised their millage, that your taxes have to match your expenses or exceed your expenses. In order for that to happen in Middletown, because there was this imbalance, the interest was taken off the investment fund to balance out the revenue side of the house. And that worked, and that got us through till this year, when unfortunately this year, the investment fund, because of the Fed manipulation of the bond market to lower interest rates, threw off approximately $200,000 in interest, when in the past we were getting anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million.
Okay, so you've lost about $1 million or more in revenue that you were gaining via the interest paid on that $3 million investment fund.
Closer to 2 million.
1.7
million. Right. So that's a significant loss, but that fund remains at that $40 million level. I mean, you have not eaten into that original investment, or have you?
We
Not
will
yet.
be.
Not yet.
Not yet, but we will be.
Not yet.
And this is a conversation Rich and I had, that if you looked at us spending that investment fund, and with all due respect, Mr. Gallagher has a different approach, and I respect him for that. He doesn't want to raise taxes. He would rather tap into the investment fund. And it's certainly another way to solve the problem. But as Rich and I spoke, you could look at this as your household budget. And basically spending that investment fund, in my opinion, is equivalent to meeting your weekly expenses by drawing down your savings. Eventually those savings are going to be gone, and you're still going to have those expenses. And if your income is not offsetting those expenses, you're going to find yourself in a deep hole. And that's what I'm concerned about with Middletown. I mean, we can kick this can down the road, people. We can do that. We can say, we're not going to do it this year. We're going to push it off another year. But every year that we do that, we draw down more in that investment fund. The gap becomes bigger, and the solution is going to become more difficult.
All right. Now, given that you have this dilemma, and it sounds like a very perplexing dilemma.
Can I just real quick add, there's a little bit more to the story, right?
All right,
So Pat started the story, which is that we counted on a revenue source. The investment fund transfer was a counted on general fund revenue source between 1.5 and 1.8 million over a many number of years. In addition to that, we always balance our budget using some of our fund reserve, right? The cash in the general fund balance. And so this year was sort of a double whammy, right? We had, because we've been relying on the cash reserves to balance the budget, we're in a bad cash position, plus we lose the $1.3 million budget transfer. So we don't have cash in hand to start out next year, or to even end up this year. And then there are the expense things that I'm sure you'll ask about. Go ahead.
All right, so given this dilemma, and as perplexing as it is, you've got your you have your all your brains trying to come up with a solution on this. You've got a very large township, a lot of very smart people, a lot of professionals, a lot of business owners, like Rich Webb, and like Rich, a good example, running a board that's responsible for a budget many times larger than Middletown's. I suspect, and you're kind of dumbfounded that people didn't come forward for some of your budget meetings and workshops, and to either hear what's going on or throw ideas out. I suspect, had you sent a press release out saying, emergency, we are in critical need of some ideas to help us head off a financial, disaster might be too strong a word, but if you let people know ahead of time that you were seriously looking at a significant tax increase, that perhaps folks might have come out and said, look, this is what I did in my business to head off this sort of a problem. Something like that, Rich, might you have shown up at that meeting and said, hey, this is what we've done on the school board, here's some ideas?
I can tell you from experience that when you do something like that, at your next meeting, you're going to have a lot of people there lining up ready what they're unhappy with. And like that question.
Well, do you have any ideas? There were, one of the things I wanted to talk about here, are there alternatives to what you want to do? Are there any other ways to go? And do you have any thoughts, Rick?
Well, my thoughts were many. I heard them say that they go to binding arbitration, which is something, as you know, I fought tooth and nail not to do. They had no choice. But I think the issue, first of all, you can say you got $39 in your checking account, and when you say you got $40 million in your savings account, you're never going to get an arbitrator to agree with you. So you're led down the slaughter at that point. And so I agree with what they're saying. I think, from my perspective, though, number one, we've already determined that the Chamonix cannot take half of this money. You implied that, the board implied that they were asking for 1% because they thought the Chamonix would take half. So my first question is, why are we talking about a full percent? Why aren't we just talking about a half a percent?
And I would respectfully disagree with the position that the Chamonix can't take a 0.5%.
Not without a referendum, and I will, I talked to Mr. Propey before I even came
But
here.
you're saying something different there. You're saying the Chamonix can. It has to put in a referendum. That's not saying the Chamonix can't take it.
I will
It's
bow
saying
to
that
you.
the Chamonix has to do certain things.
I
to
will
be
bow to you, if
put
you
in
have a
place.
referendum and the Chamonix agrees, we probably could. And you got a better chance of getting pregnant, okay? It will not happen.
Well, again,
So-
you have in the newspaper taken the board to task for saying that the Chamonix could take the
I
tax.
stand by it, sir.
And the Chamonix can.
And the other thing that they try to
Under the
do
local
is
tax
make this
enabling,
a...
under the Taxpayer Relief Act,
Time out
the Chamonix can take the tax.
Okay.
They can.
Right, they can, and I think what Rich is saying is that the likelihood of residents approving a referendum to tax themselves or to agree that the Chamonix should take that, I don't know, I think you're saying that's an unrealistic
It's
expectation.
an unrealistic...
Well, I disagree with
Except that
that.
it has a commensurate real estate tax reduction, and there are
Yeah.
a whole lot of people out there that would like that idea.
Well,
Plus,
I-
Especially
if
the
you
people
have it
who are
in
paying
Middletown,
it.
you already have it in Lower South, and if you have it in Middletown, which are the two largest populaces in the Chamonix School District, all right, and they are told that under Act whatever this is, one, that if they approve the school district having part of this, half of this earned income tax, there will be required a reduction in their property taxes equal to the amount that the school district will gain from the 0.5%. It will have no problem passing in Middletown and Lower South, both because of the amount, of property tax they see that they're going to get back, and that's it. I mean, it can go through. I don't think it'll be as difficult as Rich says. I don't want to see it happen either, but.
Uniformity, you still have Penndale, you still have Humeville, you still have Langhorne, you still have Langhorne Manor, which are all covered in the Chamonix School District.
But it's a
but they would all
district-wide,
have-
It's a
Okay.
district-wide referendum.
And the
Absolutely.
population center is in the town, the two
But
townships.
the other thing that's happened is you're spending this is basically victimless that it will help the seniors. And $56 is certainly a plus, but there are people who work in the Oxford Valley Mall that have working families that are making $25,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 a year. That, in my opinion, they would have to pay another $400 or $500 a year to live in the apartments, and I do believe that would create a hardship. And again, we go back to the worst economy that we've seen in 75 years. But ultimately, my biggest problem is the perception of the way this thing was handled. I'm very unhappy, and I am a Republican. I make no doubt about it. Our Republican candidates ran on the fact that they hadn't raised taxes in 7 years. They never come out and said they were going to raise taxes, but I believe it was implied. Certainly, if the public had known, as Guy had mentioned earlier, that there's a possibility that you would have an earned income tax, would have the election results been different? That's a very possible thing, I think.
Well, if nothing else, it might have spurred more discussion.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot more public awareness, and at that point, folks might have been coming forward with some thoughts and ideas or suggestions.
Sure.
Maybe none of it workable, but who knows what might have come out of that.
And again, I believe that this board is certainly not trying to hide anything, nor am I making implications, but I am saying that the way it was handled, I think we could have done a better job. The other issue that I think is that whenever you get into a budget like this, and again, this is not questioning the ability of our business manager or our accountant, To me, the way to handle this is you take $4 million out of this $40 million reserve, and you have a citizen advisory committee along with Mr. Mallon and whomever to analyze and review and come back with a suggestion. Then if the following year an earned income tax is necessary, you will have the citizenry on your side, and I think it takes away any of the gray area here. And that's the biggest thing. I just don't see how you can pass this when a lot of people are questioning the motives. And I think this puts it out. And if you're correct, they'll have to come back to the same.
So essentially, you're recommending a timeout.
Yep.
A year-long timeout. Borrow some money from that fund or take some money from that fund. Get through the next year and panel a citizens committee to review this and see if they don't come up with some ideas for next year. And at that point, if there are no ideas,
And let them
maybe
look
it's at least more sellable to folks in the community.
I mean, much more sellable.
What do you guys think of that idea?
Well, I think I've been on record as saying pretty much what Mr. Webb just said, except for I think it should go to a voter referendum and let the voters decide what they want to do. Do they want the $40 million bought down? We have to borrow from it to get there, but do you want us to turn around and continue to use the $40 million? Or do you want an earned income tax? Which is it you want? You can't have both.
They promise.
And that would happen in the April primary or the May primary, which means that if the voters turn around and said, go with the tax, we could implement it June the 1st. We could implement it very simple. And at the same point, if everybody says the 1% is too high, before we reduce it back to try to balance things, we could turn around and repay the investment fund whatever we had borrowed out of it. If the residents turn around and say, no, we don't want the earned income tax, we want you to use that money, then it's their choice. And I fervently think that that's I disagree with absolutely nothing Mr. Mallon has said about how we got here. I disagree with absolutely nothing about, as transparent as this board has been on this subject, and I totally believe we have been. Him and I just have a disagreement on how to resolve the issue. And I would have no problem voting for an earned income tax if the referendum the people said to do it.
Mr. Penco, if the township paid no taxes and lived strictly on the investment fund, how many years would it take us to spend $40 million?
It would be completely depleted by the year 2021.
Nobody's suggesting that.
I'm just asking the question so that everybody understands that we did absolutely, this hasn't been considered.
Doing nothing is not an option.
Well, look,
And at that point, we would be facing an $8 million deficit in 2020.
If the economy stays the way it has been and there's no
Actually, Tom,
pickup and everything else.
I factored in increasing interest rates in order taking it
okay.
from 1% to 5%.
But I'm also looking at the real estate transfer taxes and everything else that will turn around and grow if the economy starts to grow again, as we've been promised it's going to. Then we'll start to see revenues from other sources. Our mercantile tax will turn around and come in at a higher rate. Our real estate transfer taxes will come in at a higher rate. All of this has been set back disastrously based on the economy. It's real estate's not moving. I think we all know that.
That's right, and there's 7 years of no growth.
7 years of no growth is killing it.
It's my understanding that
The other number you should hear from Mr. Penco is, if all we did was raise property taxes to solve this problem, how many years would it be until we reach our statutory limit of 14 mils?
We would hit it next year.
So
Not enough room to raise $4 million of real estate.
So to close a $4 million hole at whatever point in time is going to take 1 year, a 1 year tax increase, and then we will be at 14 mils, which is our statutory cap.
We're at 7.34 right now, and we would require 8 mils to raise $4 million.
And the process for exceeding the cap is to go to court.
Go to court for 5 additional mils, which would be perhaps 1 more year. It wouldn't be a full year. So Ms. Tioli, during her budget presentation last month, laid out that the administration has looked at the different options. We have $40 million that we can spend. We can raise real property taxes, or we can institute an earned income tax. We have been operating, and again, Mr. Penko can tell you, the administration and the township have done those things over the last 3 years to cut the fat off the bone to the extent that there ever was any, and in fact have cut into some of the meat on the bone as well. The amount that we should be budgeting for capital improvements is woefully below where it should be. But given the choice between raising taxes and having to make do for whatever period of time, that's what this Board of Supervisors decided to do. So the budget numbers where they are for the last 3 years are not at their ideal level. They're not at their level to provide the optimum level of service. But again, the charge that this Board of Supervisors, whether you want to go with an earned income tax, whether you want to go with real estate tax, whether you want to pay that, whether you want to use the trust fund, the charge has been to maintain the level of services, if not improve them, and to maintain the quality of life. Those are two things that Middletown, I'm sure both of you gentlemen will agree. It's the keystone of the county when it comes to those things. The quality of life that Middletown affords its residents, the quality of life, the quality of services are what bring people to Middletown and what bring businesses to Middletown. And it's important that those be maintained and preserved and, where possible, improved. The level of police protection, the response for storms like we've had back-to-back with our Public Works Department. If you're short-staffed, the roads aren't getting plowed in time. If you're short-staffed, the potholes aren't getting fixed after the storms and the roads are damaged. Those are all things that affect quality of life, that affect property values, that affect whether or not people are going to make Middletown the place where they locate their business, raise their families, decide that this is where they want to live, work. Those are all key ingredients to what this Board of Supervisors is doing when it says we've got to close the gap. We've got to take this step now, because kicking the can down the road is only going to deplete
All right, so it sounds like you're saying
deplete the fund.
you want to make a decision now, this year, that you are not interested in maybe Mr. Webb's suggestion of borrowing some money from that fund to get you through the next year, and then impaneling a...
We're already going to do that under this budget. We're borrowing money under this budget to do that. We are borrowing money out of that. $2 million is coming out of the fund under the current budget.
Right. But
so now we'll be set.
As far as this idea goes of kind of calling a timeout and not making this decision for another year, given a citizens panel, maybe you advertise for folks in the community who want to be part of that process to come forward and help with that. Maybe one or two of you and your manager are on part of that panel. I mean, is that something that you think is worth considering? Worth giving some serious thought to?
Both these gentlemen have said they both believe that a referendum won't pass. They've already said that a referendum for an earned income tax won't pass. Half of our population in Middletown either will not pay this tax, so we can assume they'll be in favor of it because their property taxes are going to go down, or pay it somewhere else. They're currently paying a wage tax in Philadelphia, or they're paying an earned income tax to Bristol Township, Northampton Township, Lower Southampton Township, Newtown Township, all of which, by the way, don't seem to be having problems getting.
So essentially, you're saying no timeout.
So, but I would point out,
Make a decision and move on.
Well, no, but
Philadelphia doesn't give back their money. They don't have to.
To finish the point, half the people in the community will not be affected by this, by the EIT, and this budget will be a net tax reduction for them. Those who live and already pay it somewhere else, or those who don't pay it. And the other half of the community, it will be a new tax for them. So where we'll find ourselves at the end of the day is half of the people who are going to have to pay an additional tax are going to say, I don't want it. And the other half of the people who are going to have a net tax reduction are going to say, sounds good to me. We already know what the two sides of the coin are.
Is there a fairness issue there to consider? If half of the citizens of the community are going to bear the burden of this, and the other half a marginal
But half,
decrease
but
in
half aren't
But
there.
it's not,
half
it's not
aren't
half,
bearing the burden.
it's not half the people in the community, it's half
Half
the
the workers.
people in the community.
And Philadelphia,
And there are, excuse me, Rick.
that's right, but
There are, and I understand that there's opponents, and Rich, I mean, if I implied that this was victimless, that certainly was not my intent. I realize that this is a new tax for people, but, I mean, understand, 95% of the municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania have some form of earned income tax. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Do we continue to push the burden for financing township government on the backs of the real estate owners, that some of which are senior citizens living on fixed income, some of which are unemployed, some of which are on pensions, some of which are on other forms of fixed incomes. And to me, there's no coincidence that if you look at our neighbors in Northampton and Upper Makefield and in Newtown that haven't had tax increases in a number of years, have earned income taxes.
Although if you wanted to really address the unfairness of the property tax as a public servant, maybe that's something you could have started doing several years ago, incrementally, while also incrementally reducing the property tax. And then it slowly comes into vogue, and nobody sustains a lot of pain. And I think the big issue here is the sizable amount of pain that a segment of your community is going to have to bear.
And the true numbers, I mean, we bannered around half this, half that. It's 44% pay it somewhere else of the workers. 56% are about to see a brand new tax that they've never seen before of the working populace.
Philadelphia does not give back what they collect.
Correct.
And they're a good chunk of that 44%. I assume that's Philadelphia.
Nah, not really.
EIT is also a draw. I don't see how any employer says you don't have an EIT, I'm not coming. I find that hard to believe. And a referendum, just for the record, was held on the very subject that we talked about when Act 1 was passed. It failed miserably, and so I base it on that as well.
I never said that it won't pass. I think it's something that needs
Well,
to
I
be
think
sold to the people.
If the public can review, not only that, but the contracts, they need to look at everything. If the public can come out and suggest it, I think it flies. But unless you do it under a total light of the public, it's never going to go. And right now, there's a cloud on this, whether we like it or not, and that's the issue.
All right, well, look, we have about 10, 15 minutes left. I'd like to go around and solicit questions from folks on our board. And if there's anything that you guys have not addressed in the way that you wanted to, or that you haven't gotten to, let's go back to that, because I want to make sure that you've been able to speak to everything that you wanted to speak to today. Shall we start down the end there, Tom? Did you have anything that you wanted to ask these guys?
Well, number one, I'd like to agree with Mr. Webb about the cloud, and not from a malicious purpose. There's a perception because of how the campaign was waged, and no tax increases for X number of years, and then immediately you have talk of a tax increase. So I mean, there's a perception, and perception is always worse than reality. Have you thought, like Guy's suggestion was, taking the $4 million you need from the rainy day fund?
That was actually Richie's suggestion. I don't want to take credit.
Oh, what about, I
blamed.
own a house, I pay property taxes, I'm retired, I'm not gonna have any earned income tax. To a degree, and I'm no martyr, but it's like I'm skating on this. I'm not gonna be impacted. What about some combination of some smaller property tax increase and borrowing a commensurate smaller amount from the fund? As like, make everybody have a dog in the fight. And just for your information, I sent an application for to be on a board or commission the other day. So I'm available. I'm retired. I have an MBA from Lehigh.
What was your name?
Tom Tove.
Where do you live?
I put down. I listed 4. Finance was one of them. Well, Tom, actually, you had some experience when you lived over in Jersey, weren't you? You served on a planning board or something? Well, I was on the planning board a long time ago. Yeah. Bart, did you have anything?
Not really. I kind of like Tom's idea. That makes a lot of sense. Everybody, and then maybe you can put it, while you're borrowing a little bit and not, giving anybody else tax break on their property tax, then you could figure something out to put it on the ballot.
Can I say something I'll put on the ballot? I forgot something I wanted to say. I believe like when you take an elected position, you stepped up to be a leader. Putting it on a referendum is kind of like saying, I don't want to touch this. This is like a hot one. You signed up for the hot stuff too, so I don't like the referendum idea at all. Because people are always going to vote, don't raise my taxes. Right.
Carl? Well, I kind of think the whole thing just kind of comes at us all of a sudden, and that's the problem. That's what in this but I recall a statement made to me by George Metzger, former county commissioner, years ago. He said the smart politician will raise taxes in his first year because when he's up for re-election 3 or 4 years down the way, people will forget. So I'm thinking that's really what's compelling you all to move on this quickly. Because a year timeout seems like a wise thing to do, even to get the public involved in the matter, whether it goes to a referendum or not. But at least there won't be that perception that you're trying to force this through real quick and get it done.
Yeah, it just doesn't look nice. We're going to have people come in and talk about it, but we're going to vote it anyway. It's basically the perception that you're getting.
Yeah, I'm not a financial expert by any means, but I understand what Barbara and Tom and Rich have brought up. People are going to be getting their noses bent over this. One of the questions that I have is, you got this $40 million investment fund. Now, what kind of interest are you making on this $40 million investment fund? Where is it being invested?
There's been a significant change.
It can only be invested in government-backed bonds.
It can only be a bond.
It can only be bonds.
T-bills, government
Taxpayer
bonds,
money.
and guaranteed interest certificates. That's it.
But at one time, while it was generating
Absolutely the worst thing you got.
$2 million a year,
Yes.
now it's just
But now you've
generating
got
a couple
$100,000
$100,000.
going on by the Fed, which is over $50.
And it's essentially invested. It's invested the same way now that it was.
And that's
When it
according to the
was-
second-class township code. There are a list of 5 things that you're permitted to invest in.
That's true of any government body, correct?
I think that Rich and Tom and Barbara put up a good point in that if you were to elicit some input from the community as to how this problem can be fixed, you will be bending fewer noses out of shape. Now you've got 50% of people who are going to be having their taxes increased, and you said that there would be a $58 reduction in their real estate tax. What is the average what is the average income of a Middletown resident? Do you know what that is?
Between 39 and 40,000.
39 and 40,000.
39 and change.
Is that an individual or a household?
The household is 78,000.
So they're
On
going to be
average.
seeing,
And the household income isn't wages, right? So that's why you use the 39, right?
I don't-
Because household income could be things that aren't taxed for earned
Is
income.
that
I'm
what it
just
said?
thinking
when
that
it's
the
done?
people who are making $39,000, $40,000, they're only seeing a $58 reduction in their property taxes. I don't think that it's going to be a very good sell for them. Now, and I would suggest, would you consider making that property tax reduction bigger than $58 for the average house? Would you consider doing a little bit more than that?
We absolutely have talked about that based on the first year's receipt of what that EMT means. And we've taken conservative estimates. But yeah, absolutely, we would be open to looking at that during the budget session next year, that if the EIT hit the projected numbers that our consultants telling us, absolutely, we would look at further reducing real estate taxes. Absolutely.
Well, you guys, and if there's any issues, Kristen, you have questions?
I
obviously residents reach out to me a lot with some questions and some concerns they have. Two things that get brought up a lot in emails I receive. They bring up the assets that the township owns, and I know I've reported on it in the past, and I know you've spoken about it, but maybe you could just touch on the orchard and the country club, because some residents feel, why not sell these assets and try to make some money that way. Another thing is that they try to figure out how you got to this point. One issue that gets brought up is police on disability. I don't know if that's a problem in Middletown, or maybe something that you see more often in Middletown. Maybe not. I'm not sure. So I just thought I'd bring those two issues out because, like I said, I get asked those questions pretty often.
I also received a question with regard to that. There was some concern that police officers who retire on disability and then are later working full time. And I guess there's some concern there. I'm not saying it's something we need to address here, but just an issue that's been raised. At any rate, I'd like to turn it back to you guys. Rich, if you have anything you want to jump in with before we go back to these guys, I want you to, again, if there's anything you didn't address that you wanted to or didn't address in a way that you wanted to and you want to come back to it, we'll finish with that. So go ahead, Rich, if you have anything else.
Just that I'm not aware of any ordinance they have in regards to the earned income tax. I hear people reference it, but I don't believe there's an ordinance passed. The only one I could find was that there was an ordinance passed June 27, 2006, which says, and I quote, "To enact an ordinance imposing a tax for general revenue purposes on earned income only after an earned income tax is exacted by the Neshaminy School District." So they were trying to take half of it, I guess they assumed, and I know Langhorne did something similar. So I guess there is no ordinance at this point that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong. Obviously, it's not my expertise.
There is an ordinance, and it says exactly what Mr. Webb says it says.
But wouldn't you have to have a new ordinance about that?
The township is scheduled, and it's been advertised in this very newspaper that we will be amending the ordinance to take out that very provision regarding the Neshaminy School District, as well as to adjust the language regarding collections. When that ordinance was put in place, which I believe was in 2006,
June 27th,
it was before the adoption of Act 1, and then municipalities could employ their own local tax collector to collect the earned income tax since Act 1. And then Act 32, the laws have changed, and now there's a county-wide collector for the earned income tax. And so the ordinance will be revised to take out the reference to the Neshaminy School District, and also to set forth that the tax will be collected by the county tax collector rather than the local tax collector.
Pat, did you have anything you wanted to come back to?
I guess a couple things, and I'll use Tom's comment. First off, I appreciate Rich's position. I did seek Rich's counsel when I was trying to come to a solution with this, but Tom, you said something that to me is very compelling. When I ran for public office 4 years ago, and I decided to put myself out there, the people that supported me expected me to make those decisions, those tough decisions. And this is a tough decision, no doubt about it, tough decision. But in my life, in my personal life, in my career, I've never shied away from tough decisions, and I've never tried to avoid a problem. And I've run businesses. I run a $100 million division of a $1 billion corporation today, and I'm not successful because I avoid issues. I'm successful because I look to solve issues. And in my humble opinion, if we don't do something to address the structural imbalance that we've all talked about, and we don't find a way to generate revenue, and we don't do it now, then the problem only becomes exacerbated. The investment fund becomes further depleted. I mean, think about it. That $40 million investment fund at 3% interest is going to throw off $1.2 million. To get us through next year, we're probably looking at draining $10 million off that investment fund. 6 to get through this year, and probably another 6 next year, or 4 next year. We've now taken that return down from 1.2 million to 900,000. We lost $300,000 just by taking a time out. You know, we've tried for 4 years. We've tried to manage transparently. We've tried to hold the line on taxes. We tried not to put our residents under undue burden of increased taxes. And again, people can sit back, Monday morning quarterback, and say, well, you know, we should have done something 4 years ago. We elected not to. That was our decision. I'll stand by that decision. But I'll also stand by my position today that I believe that we need to address the structural deficit now. I don't believe waiting is the proper course of action. And to me, spending the investment fund without doing something on the revenue side is a flawed strategy that will destroy the financial the viability of Middletown Township in a very short time period.
No. Two things. The campaign came up a lot in this conversation today. And unfortunately, I wasn't overly involved in that campaign this year because of my physical problems this year, but I did read a lot of that literature, and I know that it specifically did say that it was, the 7 was 4 years of school district holding the line on a 0 mill tax increase, and the township 3 years at a 0 mill tax increase. Nowhere did it ever say the township held for 7, because it hasn't. That would be an out-and-out falsehood. The second question that Christian and Guy brought up about the police department, yes, the disability payments are high. I asked for these numbers and I just got them. It's close to $1.2 million a year that we're paying out to 25 different police officers on disability. If one were to look at the MMO that we got hit with this year of 2.4 million, is what we're putting in, or 2.3? 2.5 million. And look at the amount that's being put out in disability, you can see where a lot of this is going. So you can see where we're getting hit. Yes, the police department is a major cash user of the township, but they're also a major necessity of the township. I don't begrudge the officers anything. They put their life on the line every day. But, I mean, 1.2 million in disability payments, one of the highest in the state, to me is a little high, and I don't know.
And Tom, can I just add something to Mr. Gallagher's point about the pension fund? Because I think it reinforces what Tom said, and what I'm trying to say is, from 2003 to 2000 to 2003, Middletown Township put $0 into the police pension fund. The following year, they put approximately $1,000, and the next year, they put $6,000. Why? Because they were trying to balance the budget. Okay? Talk about kicking the can down the road. So here I am, the poor slob that steps into this mess, and now I'm stuck with a $2.5 million bill because of previous board, and I'm not criticizing them. They did what they felt was right at that time. But it, to me, is an example of what happens when you kick the can down the road. And people, the more we kick the can down the road, the bigger the hole becomes, and bigger the can becomes. Now we've got a can that's a dumpster. And I don't want to be kicking a dumpster because it'll break my foot.
But haven't you been doing that? I mean, you actually have been doing that for 4 years. And that's why you're in this situation, right?
Well, in my opinion, for those 4 years, we were trying to make ends meet, assuming that the investment fund was going to continue to be the cash cow that it was, while we tried to reduce our expenses. That's what I believe we did for the last 4 years. I don't think we were kicking the can down the road. What we ran into, though, was a year where the police pension fund went up. We didn't get some of the cost savings out of the contract arbitration we did with the police, and the investment fund tanked because of the Fed.
It was a triple whammy, it really was. And none of us expected the arbitration ruling to be the way it came back. I mean, basically, we got nothing. We did get some overtime removed, or situations for overtime removed. However, that's back in arbitration again, so we may lose that too.
And the other thing, to Chris and Guy, your point about disability, because I get asked the same question. Hey, Pat, and Rich and I have talked about this as well. Hey, Pat, you know, this officer is on disability, but they're working at XYZ company. Well,
Allowed by contract.
and by the Heart and Lung
Heart and Lung Act
the Heart
as
and
well.
Lung Act, which is a state law. Again, I don't make the rules of the game. I have to play by them. So the way the Heart and Lung Act reads is, if I cannot perform the duties of a police officer, then I am entitled to disability pension. And that could be a torn rotator cuff, that could be a torn pec muscle, that could be a torn ACL, because we cannot force them to go back and get surgically
Right finger.
prepared.
Can't pull the
or
trigger.
repaired. But that
I
doesn't
take
mean
my
that they can't
disability
go and
and
be a school teacher or an accountant or whatever occupation that they might choose. And we fight it, and we fought them in the past. They go to arbitration. If the arbitrator rules in their favor, they get that.
See, there's been a lot of things going on and being said all over the township right now, and since I've been on the board the same amount of years as Pat, 4 years, there's been 3 individuals that have gone out on disability, okay? One absolutely positively needed to go. I mean, there was no doubt. He had multiple surgeries, tried very hard to come back. He wanted to be back. He couldn't be back, and he had to be put out on disability. There were 2 others that in the first year that we were on the board, and the lawyer at the time, the current labor lawyer at the time, told us that he had a 95% chance of winning in the arbitration, and that we should proceed, so we did. And the first one got awarded, and we got smacked pretty hard. We lost that one, all right? And then it was recommended and settled the second one because they're the exact same case. And needless to say, after that, the Labor Council got replaced, all right? But those are the 3 that have happened in our lifetime on the board. Prior to that, all right, there's 22 others that are out there, and they're using up $1.2 million a year.
Does the town self-insure for that?
Disability, it comes right out of that pension fund.
Disability
comes out of the pension.
paid out of the pension fund.
Comes out of the pension fund. So, I mean, we're putting in 2.5, and 1.2 is coming right out for disability.
I think it's important to understand that the issue with the MMO, the minimum amount that we pay into the pension each year, although the disability pension is an impact to that, the down market of 2008 is a big hit on our pension fund, just like all other pension funds. We're still digging back out from that right now.
Was there anything, Stephanie, you wanted to add?
No, I mean, you know, I have tons of information if you had any questions about any of those things.
All right, well, look, we wanted to thank you guys for coming in. We really appreciate it. We are going to have some of this on our website for residents to see, so if you're unable to get to your meeting. And I just wanted to note and commend you guys for opening your meeting up for public comment on the record, giving folks a chance to be heard in a different way and in a way that, from what we heard, they wanted to have. So, again, thanks very much. And,
But to that end, there was a tremendous amount of positive feedback from those people
and we heard that too.
attended the workshop.
Yeah, we heard that.
Unparalleled access to their elected officials. All 5 elected officials, township manager, finance manager, all the department heads were all there for 3 hours to answer questions.
Okay, well, thanks again.
I left a whole bunch of handouts for you if you want to.